What you see in front of you is a game in which you will play as crazy constructors of the spacecraft. It will be your job to use a variety of electronic waste from a nearby junkyard to build a fly-worthy spacecraft. Build your first spacefaring construct, complete original projects, and design your own spacecraft. In the box you can find a manual, two-sided junkyard board, 4 player boards with different inventors' characters, a 3-part workshop in which rocket parts, junk tiles, and workshop tokens are kept, 30 basic design cards, 9 advanced design cards, 4 spacecraft blueprint cards, 4 colored pawns, player markers for advanced variants of the game, 8 individual goal cards, and 4 countdown cards. Place the junk board in the center of the table, choosing the side corresponding to the number of players. Turn all the junk tiles face down and shuffle them. Then in a 3 or 4 player game, form them into piles of 3 tiles. Then put each pile onto a junkyard space, face up. In a 2-player game, make 12 piles of 4 tiles and 4 piles of 5 tiles in the 4 center locations. Set up the 3-piece workbench with rocket parts placed in correct compartments as shown in the manual. 4 randomly selected workshop tokens with weight 1 or 2 are placed then face up in the first section of the workshop A. All the unplaced workshop tokens are randomly placed face up in the next section of the workshop. Draw 1 rocket blueprint card and place it clearly visible on the table. Below it, place all the countdown cards stacked in descending order. Each player receives the player board and pawn in their chosen color, a starting hull, 2 random individual goal cards which are placed face up near their player board. In standard variant, you need to remove a number of cards depending on the number of players. In a game with 4 players, we remove 2 cards from each set, and in the game with 2 players, we remove 4 cards from each set. Next, we deal 8 cards and place them in upper and lower rows, 4 cards in each. In the advanced variant of the game, only advanced design cards are used and are placed in one line in accordance with the manual and depending on the number of players. Additionally, each player receives 6 player markers in their color. Last but not least, the last countdown card should be turned to its B side. After that, you're ready to play. During play, you will collect junk that you will use to build individual rocket parts. What is more, each player will be trying to complete design cards and to achieve their individual goal to get as many points as possible. The first player to construct an airworthy spacecraft will begin the countdown to the end of the game. The player with the highest number of points wins. On a player's turn, the player must do one of these 3 actions: visit the junkyard, search for junk, and leave the junkyard. The Visit the Junkyard action consists of placing a player pawn onto a junk pile that is on the outer edge of the junkyard board. The tile on the top of the stack is then removed from the board and placed on a free space of the player's board. All the collected tiles must fit on the player board, which can hold 4 junk tiles. Also, it's worth remembering that the total weight of the tiles must be 7 or less. Search the Junk action is all about moving pawns on the junkyard board. A pawn can move in a single straight line, through sides, not diagonally, to an adjacent pile, or to the farthest pile. It can reach in that straight direction. Movement is blocked by other pawns and by empty spaces. In such situations, the space right before the blocking obstacle is the farthest reachable pile in that direction. After moving a pawn onto a proper stack, the player takes the visible tile and places it on the player board, remembering about the weight limit. If a pawn is blocked from moving in all directions, the player cannot search the junk. They must instead leave the junkyard. The next action is Leave the Junkyard, which allows players to remove their pawn from the Junkyard board. When this action is chosen, the player removes all junk tiles from their player board and places them near their player board, visible to all players. Then, the player can do one or both of the following two actions, in order: build rocket parts and fulfill design cards. Build rocket parts action allows players to build up to 2 rocket parts using gathered junk tiles. While exchanging junk tiles for a desired rocket part, you need to observe minimal weight of all the junk tiles used in exchange, and you need to comply with the required junk tile type, which is presented on the workshop token. The excess weight of tiles is lost, and all the used tiles are unusable and removed from the game. Any remaining unused junk tiles are kept face up near the player's board and can be used in future turns. While leaving the Junkyard, the player can also fulfill tasks from cards in the bottom row of the design cards. When a player fulfills a design, they take that card and put it face up near their player board. A player can fulfill at most 2 designs per turn. To fulfill a design, the player's rocket must meet the card's requirement. That is, the rocket consists of an appropriate number of parts. If a player does not fulfill any design cards, they may instead take one design from the bottom row to reserve it. A player can have only one reserved card at a time. In the advanced variant of the game, players have other means to gain additional points. Each player may place one of their player markers on the chosen empty space of a visible advanced design cards from left to right. This indicates for which parts of the spacecraft the player will be rewarded with points. If a player doesn't have their markers on a certain card, then no points are awarded. The last field on an advanced design card, covered with a player marker, shows how many points each player with a marker on that card will receive for having the indicated part. The game ends when final launch card is revealed. Players gain points for triggering the launch countdown, 5 points or 10 in the advanced variant of the game. Meeting the conditions of the rocket blueprint car, 5 points. Individual goals, design cards. The player with the most points wins the game. In the case of a tie for a high score, the tied player with the most unused junk tiles wins. Construct your first spacecraft and amaze the scientific community or family and friends with your original design.